Welcome everyone to the third session and final session of the event on health screening and intervention. I'm Sophia Willer, and I want to thank Cecilia and Arvidum for inviting me to chair this session. It's been really exciting to hear about all the challenges and opportunities ahead. The first speaker of the section is Lauren Bell. So Lauren is a clinical trial statistician working as a research assistant at the Biostatistics Unit, who is strongly committed to providing comprehensive and robust statistical support to her collaborators to work together to improve the health and well-being of patients and the public. Her research focuses on the intersections of trials methodology to continually optimize complex and dynamic interventions, data visualizations, and modeling techniques for longitudinal and survival data. And her talk today is on designing randomized trials to optimize the notification policy of a behavior change app. Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, Sophia. Thanks as well, Cecilia, for inviting us. We definitely feel like I'm with my people here, listening to these wonderful talks today. So I'm going to talk about a new type of trial design called micro-randomized trials, and these are to create a type of personalised intervention called just-in-time adaptive interventions. I'm not sure if that's a familiar term in computer science. Has anybody heard of just-in-time adaptive interventions? Or, yeah, great, 1, 2, great, okay. Just the outline of the talk. I'm going to introduce an app called Drinkless, which is freely available on iTunes. It has been since 2016. It's a complex intervention to help people cut back on their hazardous and harmful alcohol drinking. And I'm going to show some data visualizations with the cohort of users, around 20,000 users there, to look at temporal trends over time and how we can actually optimize the app, because digital health actually, as we all know, you can do lots of iterative research cycles of research and development there. Then I'll introduce just-in-time adaptive interventions and how these can be created through a new type of trial called micro-randomized trials. I'll briefly touch on some statistical challenges here about estimates, estimands, and estimators, and why you might want some statistical guidance when analysing the data to make statements of causal effects with this type of trial. I'll show you some results and then some future aspirations as well. Okay, so this is Drinkless. It's a complex intervention, so that means it's got a number of active ingredients in there. There's more than one thing in there that's going to help you cut back your drinking. It's all driven by evidence and theory of behaviour change, but the everyday terms of the modules that in there is that there's self-monitoring, so keeping track of your drinking. You can set goals. You can record your daily mood and how that's relating to your drinking patterns. You can also play a game where you flick away alcohol units and accept, or alcoholic drinks, and accept things like Diet Cokes and soft drinks to help your identity change. And you can create plans. And the current version of the app every day sends this daily notification saying, please complete your mood and drink diaries. And that's all about creating a self-awareness of how you're going with your goals to cut back on your drinking over time. So the first off, well, this was with the owners of Drinkless are at the UCL Tobacco and Alcohol Group. They're behaviour change scientists there. And since the app had been up and running since 2016, we were very fortunate to have a large amount of data to see how it's been used in everyday life and what these temporal trends can show us. So we had about 20,000 users. The date of download was May 2017, so we had about just over 2 years. Use of data, the minimum exposure, so after downloading the app, was 84 days, and we have a real rich data set here with about 8 million screen views and other entries here to consider. And as you can see straight away, that through some simple visualizations here with heat maps and some time series plots, that this signal of asking people at 11 a.m. each day is really influencing the way that people engage with the app. That there's this signal coming through here. You can see on heat map A is just when people start a session, and then heat map B is the length of time on the session. So you can see in the evenings there's a stronger signal coming through of more time in the evening. And then the plot E shows when people are reporting that they had an alcohol-free day. And then plot F is when they actually say how many drinks they had. And you could see that there's actually also a natural peak in this evening coming through. And that's of interest to us because we hypothesize that people are more vulnerable to excessive alcohol drinking in the evenings, and perhaps they're also in a state where they're quite relaxed, and it's an opportunity where they're accepting of using the app, and perhaps exploring a treatment effect of intervening at that time is worthwhile. We also looked at trajectories of use over time. So I created a data set which looked at a binary variable of did the user open the app 0 or 1 across 30 days, and then we ran some K-modes clustering in there to look at some different treatment effect heterogeneity going on. There was 3 clusters which we found. So the fast disengages there was just over 50%, and this is quite a common thing with these free behaviour change apps, is that people are motivated to download them, but they don't really stick with it. And then there's, interestingly, these 2 other clusters coming through where there's a green one on the top, and their probability of opening the app every day over 30 days remains high and consistent over the first month. But then there's this slow disengagers group where you can see that they seem pretty motivated to report to you open the app each day, but this drops over time. And we hypothesize there that they're actually experiencing something called habituation, where they're being sent this message, but over time you lose interest. And to be honest, I would probably be in that group too. Somebody asked me to do something every day. Over time you lose the motivation to do it. So we looked at the user characteristics within this group, and you could see that the people who are at the most risk of harmful alcohol consumption are actually more likely to be in the fast disengagers or slow disengagers group. So it's not working for those vulnerable people as well as it could be. And we have created a proxy treatment effect, which was, did the user open the app between 10 and 11 versus a risk ratio of opening the app between 11 and 12. And you can see here in table 4 that this risk ratio remains pretty high for the engagers cluster, but this slow disengagers cluster here, the signal starts to drop over time. So this analysis of the cohort data actually indicated to us that optimizing the policy is a worthwhile investment. We think that we can actually keep users engaged for longer by creating a better policy than the one that we have now, which is just a fixed daily notification that's sent every day. And that means that we'd actually like to create something called a just-in-time adaptive intervention. And this is building into the personalised medicine field. And just-in-time adaptive interventions, they aim to deliver the right support to the right person at the right moment. As you have this wealth of rich data coming in about users, and you can track their risk and their vulnerabilities or their progress with their health over time. And there's another review here, which is quite nice, looking at just-in-time adaptive interventions for addiction science. To build these types of interventions, you can actually do a particular trial called a micro-randomized trial. And this is where you randomise people perhaps hundreds or thousands of times a day, and you get this time series data. So the MIT allows you to do 2 things, which is make statements about your causal effect. In your research, you can say, we know that the notification had this type of effect, and it also allows you to look at effect moderation, so how previous current states actually modify the average effect. And then with this information, you can start to build better policies. So as we've talked a lot about longitudinal data here in this session, so you can imagine a time series data where you're intervening at A's, did you send in a randomized notification out or not? You've got an outcome of did they open the app between 8 and 9 p.m. is what you're hoping to do. But then you have this rich contextual information coming in through sensors and wearables that can help build this really complex history up. And you can create subsets that you're interested in from your history. So what does this repeat randomization, this within-person N of 1 type randomization allow for you that a normal RCT wouldn't do? And that is you can make a statement about the near-term average effect over time. And then you can also see how recent contextual states modify this effect and also how long-term effects are possible as well as near-term effects. And then I'll show you how we use this information to build a better policy to keep users engaged with Drink Less. There's some statistical challenges which, when you're doing these type of trials, to have some statistician advice on. I'll just briefly touch on these, and that's you've got quite a lot of, you might be randomizing people many times. You've got real rich high-dimensional data. Because there's randomization, there's no confounding, but you do have situations where you have something called endogeneity, where internal states, so your past history will influence how the notification effect in the future. And you've got a framework where you first want to establish a marginal effect over time, and then you want to look at secondary objectives of effect moderation, and you need a consistent way of doing that. So this is the MRT trial that we aimed to do. Through previous research of consulting Drink Less users and some other work, we discovered that what is associated with good engagement is actually perceived usefulness of the app and motivation to use it. So we created a new bank of 30 messages which had examples as that playing the yes, thanks, no game can help you reduce your drinking or can help you drink less. So tapping into their motivation and their reasonings for downloading the app to begin with to keep them engaged. We set that time at 8 p.m. because we believe it's a state where they're both vulnerable to excess drinking and an opportunity that they might be in a more relaxed state, and the window for an hour, and our outcomes, did they open the app between 8 and 9 following the randomization at 8 p.m. We also had enough sample to be able to look at other policies. So when users downloaded the app, they were randomized to the MRT here, but we also looked at a current policy, which was the 11 a.m. notification daily that is currently implemented in the app, and no notification at all to look at how engagement over time evolves naturally. And this randomization here allows us to look at exchangeable estimates because later on this trial actually happened during the pandemic, as the pandemic kicked off. So it was worthwhile looking. We had an exchangeable sample to look at the current notification compared to the MRT because the changes and the shock to the environment meant that previous cohort that we showed with the visualization wasn't completely comparable to what the MRT showed. So our primary objective here is to look at what the notification effect is, and we pulled both estimates here and we looked at the relative risk. So this here is 3.52, so the probability of opening the app for when you receive a notification versus not increases by 3.52 in magnitude. And you can see that the two notification types seem to be work pretty well at this time too. They're comparable in their magnitude. However, when you look at the state, so we defined a state of disengagement, which is 7 days of not using the app. And we wanted to see when users hit that state, because that's what we want to create, a policy which keeps people engaged. And here, through the 3 policies in this Kaplan-Meier plot, we look at the survival fraction over time. And you can see here that this purple line is the no notification policy. There's the random policy, which is the MIT, and the standard one. And you can see that there's a tiny kick. The acceleration of the no notification policy around day 7 is slightly worse than the other 2, but day 30, they're the same. So we're not achieving, through this random policy, we're not achieving our goal of keeping people engaged. When you look at some summative measures of the policies over time, we've got people in the no notification arm tend to actually have a bit of a longer session here than the random and standard policies as well. So one of the benefits that we get from this repeat randomization is looking at effect moderation. So how does this current state actually modify this near-term effect? And we looked at 2 different states. One is, did the user receive a notification the day before? So are we sending too many in a way? It's a bit of a burden there. And then we looked at the state, did the user open the app between 8 and 9 p.m. the day before, and they're already engaged. And you can see here that the standard message, when the person had received a notification the day before, the standard message, the effect moderator, drops by about 12%. So this is an indication that perhaps we need to space it out a little bit more. And the already engaged user, if they had opened the app the day before between 8 and 9, then the new message, which aims to reignite engagement, drops by about 20% in effect. So what are the research conclusions? Was that the notifications are really important tools in apps because they do have near-term effects, so they're worth considering in these interventions and create dynamic policies about states of users and when to intervene. But we think that actually a more optimized policy is one of sending a notification which increases perceived usefulness when people are at risk of disengaging. Here are some research outputs, if you can see, and the data. And finally, then there's ways in how we can create a more optimized policy and gathering the contextual information to look at risk of disengagement as more sensors come involved. There's excess drinking and trying to identify states when people are quite relaxed and to intervene then. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you.